Sissy, Joe, thank you for being with me today. I'm so glad to be doing this with you. My name is Irene. A little introduction about myself. I've been at Salesforce for just over 2.5 years. I'm a commerce specialist. And during my time at Salesforce, I've had the opportunity and privilege of working with so many different brands, so many amazing people, and really to witness how they've transformed their B2B commerce, how they've scaled, how they serve their customers. And I think there's never been a better time, a more exciting time to be involved in this space.
Great.
And buyer expectations are changing. The technology is moving really fast, as I'm sure we'll unpack today.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what I would like to focus on today's podcast. So the trends that are shaping B2B commerce, the buyer's expectations, and really where you see the industry going in the next few months and even years ahead. So Sissy and Joe, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Thank you for the great introductions and the exciting topic that we're going to talk about today. So my name is Sissy Asraoui. I'm currently a solution engineer at Salesforce dedicated to what we used to call B2B commerce at Salesforce, or commerce on core if you prefer. Been working in Salesforce for the past 7 years, working across industries, supporting company to tailor and modelize what self-service look like from a transactional standpoint. Delivering the offering online for different customers, and from HLS company, manufacturers, business services. Very excited to talk about this today.
Brilliant. Nice to meet everyone. My name's Joe Prentice. To put it on record, by the way, I just want to say I absolutely love B2B commerce. I think
You're in the right place.
It's my favourite Salesforce product. So other than Slack, maybe. I'm a Salesforce practice lead for Astound Digital, covering the EMEA region. I've been in the Salesforce world for about 8 years, worked across pretty much all of the Salesforce core products and across industries as well. So HLS, manufacturing, CG, retail, FS. There's been a lot of different projects over the years. I think one of the things actually about that is that just working across those industries, it's allowed me to sort of take little bits of what I've learned from those and apply them to other projects. So it's been really useful in doing that. But can't wait for the chat today. So I look forward to it.
Sissy, I'm coming to you first with the first question, if that's okay.
Sure.
So we know that the B2B commerce space, the B2B commerce industry is really shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And you're spending an incredible amount of time with customers, really guiding them through this transformation. What I've observed is that the transformation is no longer just about the technology, it's about the people as well. So in your opinion, from spending time with customers, what are the biggest trends that are guiding this transformation when it comes to B2B commerce?
As you rightfully mentioned, the idea of kind of like now emerging trend around the B2B and what are the different kind of like, I would say trend, they are converging trends, if I may say. They are all intertwined. So the first one, if we kind of start to talk about, is the B2B buyers' expectations, where from a front-end perspective is that we have this, I call this like the 3 Cs, where customers are expecting to have a catalog, a cart, and a checkout, which are mirroring a lot what you have potentially from an Amazon type of experience, or even like Spotify, when you go navigate, buy what you need, and then basically just check out. The different kind of aspect when you interact with B2B commerce is that they want to do the same things, but as a bulk order. They want to do a repeat order. I think the main differentiation is that as much as they want to mirror what they have in a consumer life, in a B2B world, they have all this complexity that they want to expose, or first of all, consume, aggregate, and also expose to the customers. So this is where I think the trend kind of like is mirroring what B2C is from a seamless type of experience, but differentiating what is a shopping experience, but also a buying experience. We kind of also mentioned that we are like looking for personalization, seamless experience, accurate, real-time data. This is where it comes from a B2B world, because the B2B has a dependency between each other. It's a professional relationship. And B2B buyers need your product and services for their own business. Doesn't matter if you talk to a CG customer who's going to replenish their aisles, or if you're talking to a construction company who need a specific amount of brick or cement to be able to deliver this project. So this is one of the trends. The second one is that where we kind of like looking this kind of digital first procurement and self-service around like how the experience look like. There is a huge trend kind of like notified that 75% of buyers prefer to go rep-free type of digital experience. The reason why is that they want to do on their own, as I said, mirroring the B2C experience. They want to be able to compare product. They want to be able to search it and hit the buying button on their own. The funny thing is that it also creates a paradox because the thing is that those experiences today are still kind of on the verge of conversion and kind of transforming rapidly because we are looking at kind of like this two kind of dimensional paradox where as much as they want to behave as a self-service, they also want to be assisted. An interesting report from Gartner was referring to the fact that they call it the hybrid approach, which is kind of two different dimensions, which is the value framing and the value also, I would say, affirmations, which is a combination of like self-service experience, lets the kind of customer navigate to the extent to what the business model of the business are looking for to deliver, but also to be supported by the teams. I would say the third trend is kind of more related to all we're facing today, even in the consumer life, which is related to AI, automation. How can this converge to kind of like helping your customer think about customer insights, think about recommendations, think about things such as, I would say, predictive type of B2B behavior. It's a huge trend, kind of having this virtual dimension to support. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about the front-end experience or even the internal teams. And then one of the last pieces that when we kind of talking is that, as you rightfully said, the technology is not only a point, it's also about the company, the big picture. Now, involved in multiple projects with company, we start to talk about sustainability, ESG kind of consideration. When you are in a process, doesn't matter if you're like in an RFP process or even a tent for a customer, they start to talk about like how the company is environmentally kind of like involved, how ethically the value of the company is. Those different kind of questions weren't asked 5 years ago. Now it's basically a basic requirement. But I think you also have some points around, like, because you implement this type of project for customers.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask a question back to you. I was going to say, of these trends, like, how much are you seeing at the moment that your customers are either sort of going on that journey, or sort of what's the maturity you're seeing at the moment of customers throughout that B2B life cycle?
So the maturity is that the front-end experience is today a must-have, where 5 years ago it was a huge differentiator in the B2B landscape compared to the competitions or even the markets. Today, we are talking to customers already successful in their fields, doesn't matter the size, commercials, SMB customers, or even enterprise. What they're looking at is to kind of optimize this experience. And the biggest trend today is AI. I think the biggest conversation from a Salesforce standpoint is everything related about agent force. How are we supporting customer to be able to kind of like uplift this experience? And again, assisted shopping, as I mentioned earlier, recommendation, promotion engine, all this driven type of insight. How can we take this data, which is key for the customer, and expose it to basically to the end customer who's going to navigate through the experience?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think what we've seen is a similar journey. As I said, probably like 5 years ago, if I was speaking to a customer about a B2B site, it was new and innovative. It was something they were leading the charge with. I think now it's an expectation that customers want that sort of digital first touch point. So when business is interacting, they want to be able to have self-service. They want to be able to have that level of sort of touch. AI is that sort of new, I guess, maturity curve where a lot of businesses are really trying to dip their toe into it and really understand how that can impact, I think, where in the business they are looking to do that. I don't think commerce is the first place that they've initially looked at, but I think we're definitely going to see a big growth as businesses become more mature in AI, that is going to be sort of the next wave of maturity.
Yeah, you're totally right. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And if I can just ask another question, obviously Sissi has been mentioning about this ever-changing customer expectations. Yeah. So obviously you're spending a lot of time across many different industries with customers who are going through and navigating these challenges. So in your opinion, what are the top 1 or 2 ways that they can adapt to this ever-changing customer expectations?
It's a good question.
What's top of mind?
I think,
Or what should be top of mind?
yeah, what I'd probably say is that a lot of what our clients are doing, the ones that are leading the charge, should I say, they're sort of really focusing on B2B being not just a product in their wheelhouse. It's not just something that it's another license that they buy from another vendor. The customers that are really doing well are B2B as a strategy. It's part of a wider overview of how they're managing their business. They may have, I guess, different ways of selling to customers. They might have B2C, they might have B2B, they might have sell B2B that then sell on to those end customers. They might be distributors. So of all these different models, I think B2B traditionally was something that was seen as a left behind on the side in terms of technology. It was something that was just functional. Whereas now it's a differentiator. It's something that sort of really adds. So I think the customers that are really growing and sort of innovating are the ones that are seeing this as a strategy they implement within their business, not only as something else.
I agree. And if I can just add a point on the strategic mention that you refer to, is the idea of that when we go to this kind of like change mentality of business and kind of like bringing them, doesn't matter the stage of the company, yeah? Because we work with like multiple projects, I guess. The first kind of like step into the self-service, do we have the customer who already have some kind of like already some exposure to the online services and the upgrade, or we have like the full transformation? I think one of the trend that we're seeing is that the idea of like seed and grow type of approach, and it's really key for customers where you have a project roadmap, you have a transformation that is, as Joe referred to, is going to touch so many departments because we're talking about the anchor of the business, is the sales cycle. Yeah. But it's just the idea of kind of like phasing approach of that. We are kind of leading to the idea of the customers, they kind of working at a certain pace. Don't think about they want the big bang because generally speaking, those customers never achieved the vision. Kind of start small and adapt how the customer is responding to it. So I think it's a big trend that I'm seeing over the last 2-3 years.
Yeah, and on that, I think that's probably a change in approach to technology generally. If you'd gone back 10 or 15 years, I think those big bang projects, those 2-3 year engagements were common. I think most businesses were operating in them. I think now what we're seeing, and I think most people in the industry were seeing, is that continuous improvement model. Like they do have those sort of start small and then they're looking to iterate. That might mean sometimes there's failures in projects, sometimes there's lessons learned, there's things that they don't want to do. But by doing that sort of smaller, more incremental approach, you've got less over-engineering, you've got less, I guess, technical debt that you end up having because you're starting to see what works, what doesn't work. And it's a really good way of being able to manage those projects.
Mm-hmm. One more question. It feels like that in this space, the lines between B2B commerce and B2C commerce are very much blurring, both in terms of expectations and technology. So if I was to ask you, can you explain the difference between B2B commerce and B2C commerce in your views?
You take this one? Okay. Yeah. So this is how I talked about the shift in the behavior from the end customers. And I'm going to use this sentence a lot. And I don't want to take credit. I heard it one day and I repeat it like again and again. So it's not mine, but it's really the kind of 3 C's. From a customer experience, we're going to have similarities in terms of seamless experience, personalized type of kind of behavior, recommendation product, and assisting the customer. Doesn't matter if it's a B2B or B2C. Where we're going to see the B2C is quite linear. You're going to have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 potentially kind of segmentation. Think about an Amazon type of experience, which is quite binary. You have Amazon Prime and you have standard Amazon type of experience. But in the B2B, you kind of dealing with like a massive volume of customers. When you start to integrate the idea of a global approach, multiple tiering of customer per countries, different behaviors. When you're going to talk, if I take an example, for example, for CG, they have type of brand-led type of experience where they deliver different brands, sometimes to the same customers. Talk about HLS. They're kind of providing different experiences, but aggregated by one single company, the branding, the kind of recognitions, the insights, how to support this one hub. So this is where the B2B is more granular because you need to integrate different things such as negotiated pricing, promotion that are tailored. We talk about sometimes commit, where the customer, they're forecasting through the year to be able to have negotiated pricing. Think about contracted relationships. All those different things needs to be brought into this experience to be reflected to the different behavior. And this is where I see the most shift. And most likely is that if I have to resume this, and this was a long answer, sorry about that, but like if I had to resume it in 2 sentences, that a B2C experience, it's a shopping experience. A B2C, I get you sunglasses or your pink shirt because I like it, but there is multiple brands that are delivering. So I'm comparing to see which is the best approach. So there's a type of seduction type of approach. I need to seduce my customer base to be able to deliver this. Where in a B2B, there is a dependency. Mm-hmm. I need your product and services for my own business because my business depends on this. And it doesn't matter if you're working for a software company or if you're working for CGs or even if you're working for HLS. This is where I need to, as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about CG, replenishing the aisles, or for HLS, HCPs needs to reorder the plasters for the month. So this is, I would see, the most kind of converging point in terms of experience, but diverging point of how you tailor the experience to them.
Yeah, I think Cece's covered quite a lot there. But I think, in my eyes, it's very similar to what Cece said. I think there's a lot that we can do behind the scenes within a B2B environment, whether that's complex pricing, complex fulfillment logic. I think in B2C, it's quite transactional. It's the way that you can sort of go, there's a particular product or service, there's a purchasing journey, fulfillment is going to a single person, whereas from a business perspective, we could be sort of ordering sort of hundreds of thousands worth of DNA strands for a laboratory. So there's, the rules and the engine behind B2B. I think that's probably traditionally why it was something that wasn't digitized, is because the technology wasn't necessarily there to be able to manage that complexity. Whereas now we're seeing that that's something that can be achieved.
I agree.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked about the trends, we've talked about the expectations. Let's focus a little bit on the technology side of things. Mm-hmm. Because I think when you think about B2B commerce platforms specifically, they are so much more, especially today. They have to do so much more than just processing transactions. And there's a lot of buzz around things like AI, automation, composability even. So if we think about AI a little bit, you've touched on it briefly, but if you think about AI, and coming to you both with this question, what do you think are the biggest trends, or where's the biggest impact that AI can have in this space?
I think there's probably 2 points to this. Is what impact can AI have, and what impact is AI currently having at the moment? I think at the moment what we're seeing with our customers, and at least conversation we're having as well with prospective customers, is that, I think I mentioned this earlier on, AI is something that people have seen and that sort of adopted quite well in the service space, whether that's like self-service, chatbots, and looking at managing case deflection. There was a retail brand that I'd previously done an AI project with, where that's exactly what they were looking at covering. So it was on their website, on their help center. People could put their questions in. That then would deflect and look at their knowledge base and actually then answer those questions. And if not, it would then automatically generate cases and assign that to the correct team. So there was action and I guess some level of agentic behavior, but it was very much aimed within that self-service and customer service space. I guess where we are seeing this potentially go to and where it could help within B2B and B2B commerce is quite impressive. It's quite it's getting to a really cool space. I think one of the things that I saw recently that we shared at Connections, I think that was last week, was around. It was a slightly different lens of the personal shopper agent. So rather than it being a chatbot in the bottom corner, it was a personalized, intuitive UI on the page of the website. There was a search at the bottom. When you searched it, dynamically changed the display of the products that it was coming up with. You could then scroll as part of that, and that search still stayed there, but the product scrolls sort of went through. So I think we'll see a big shift in how we see like UI and design of sites. I think that is something that will sort of really change sort of that intelligent search. I guess the other one that I've seen recently was looking at, I think, more around the back end of B2B rather than looking at B2B commerce, just thinking of it as a storefront, where it was more in a partner model for a distributor. They were in a Slack channel for their distributors were in a Slack channel. Within that Slack channel, they could post a request of what they wanted to be quoted. That then went into the back end of commerce, retrieved their particular account level pricing, retrieved the kind of volumes they were allowed to, contracted for that, pulled that back into a quote, and then presented that quote back to them in Slack. So it was a really cool way of seeing, I guess, an interaction and being able to get some kind of complex rules and complex pricing without needing to actually even interact with the storefront itself.
No, you're totally right. And if I had to build on what you talk about the user experience, is kind of like going back to the point when you talked about composable experience. We are focusing today on a B2B storefront, but today we're not talking anymore about like an independent and standalone, very rigid solution.
Yeah.
We are talking about the full sales cycle. Of course, the front-end experience is key because this is where you're capturing the customer information and needs to be tailored, as Joe was referring to different use cases. When you talk about case deflections, are you talking about quoting process? The customer needs to have the self-serve. But the idea is that when you bring to the table, now when you talk about experience from a transactional standpoint, we're touching on different, and I like to call it line of engagement. This kind of breaking the silos, where before we were talking about like the delivering the experience, when you know who are your accounts, you define a certain pricing, but now you want to know the behavior of those accounts. What type of marketing campaigns they have been reaching out to, how many cases have been raised. You talked about quoting, but we're talking also about opportunities. So from a Salesforce standpoint, we kind of having more kind of I would say, a journey type of experience from end to end, which doesn't stop with the customer, but it also involves this internal team. Think about, generally speaking, in a B2B, and I'm going to be exhaustive here, but like generally the people from the internal business that touch, that are touching an opportunity or even like an order from the sales cycle could be from 5 to 12 different departments. Could be simultaneously, could be sequentials, but they need to know the same information about the customer. So this kind of visibility of composable, as much as I need the brick, depending how you want to reach out to customers. Because we have customers, and if I have to refer to some customers in CG where they're very mom and pop shops, where it's very kind of around the corner and I need to be very quick, very user-friendly. But you have on the other side, like very enterprise where they need to have insight. You need to be educated. And this is based on the same account. So the single view of the customer, but adding brick instead of building it, and kind of being growing with the business, it's really key. As I mentioned earlier, mirroring what's happening in a business, developing a front-end experience, a user experience, but adapting as it changed. So if I have to talk in a front-end from the commerce realm, think about checkout. Something simple. When you're going to have in a B2C, you have your card that is plugged in or so on. But if you need to have a very custom because it's complex how you're aggregating and you're not paying up front, you have a quote process, plug in your current system. If you're looking to have the CRM data, knowing who your account is, what type of tiering or segmentation, bring CRM, bring data cloud into the table. So this is where we kind of the convergence and the connected experience that from me I'm seeing from this composable view, where in Salesforce we call it the building approach. It's a building blocks, think about a Lego, and basically you're developing and you're growing from different line of engagement. The same customer, just served differently, how depending on how you want to engage with them. So this is where the most things that I'm seeing.
Yeah. When I mentioned earlier on about B2B as a strategy, that's exactly what I was sort of touching on. So looking at B2B as part of a wider lens within the business process. B2B is another channel to support your sales, but that could be coming from sort of anywhere. But it's also, I guess, we're talking about B2B commerce. I guess there's the storefront, but then there's also the back end, all of the rules, all the logic, the pricing, the products, the merchandising, all of the data that sits behind the site as well is something that is, I guess, then filtered into your quoting, that's filtered into your ordering, that goes into the integration to your downstream finance system. So it's thinking of B2B and how that fits alongside the whole wider business process, not just as a standalone item, just to track orders and just to surface data to customers.
Yeah, and no, go ahead.
And
go
I
ahead.
was going to say on that point, just I'm curious and I'm interested about like how do you approach this kind of back-end behavior, just simply where as I said, the kind of front end experience end for the customer, and the internal business is going to start to kick in, and like the process is going to take into place. Just related to this order, because the order have like a life cycle on its own when it's going to be captured. How do you kind of see this trend happening with the customers, and how do you manage it from a project standpoint?
Yeah, from a customer perspective, what we actually see is there's normally two angles, and whether that's the customer themselves or different departments in the business that are sort of normally battling for the right requirements. You've got people that want to focus on the visual, the design, the nice, and then there's people that want, I guess, probably a bit more of a functional site, but actually want the processes and the activities to be the main focus. I think how we then try and interact with customers, and I guess try and get the best of both, because both of them are important. Both of them are a focus of what we need to do. It is looking at not only the internal processes of what that business is doing, it's also looking at the buyer journey and the buyer processes, and trying to take a step back from technology. And we say, let's actually understand what this journey needs to look like. What does this life cycle need to look like? Let's go end to end. How are we actually sort of understanding what we need to do, whether that is surfacing products at the right time, whether that is being able to place an order, how that order then flows downstream. Are we having any kind of interactions between salespeople and people that are interacting on the site? Do we have, I guess there's a trend we're starting to see now, is that sort of blend between digital and physical as well. I guess we're seeing that on a B2C side, but also within the B2B world, where buy online, pick up in store, but also you might be in store and you might want that to be surfaced back into like a fulfillment back at your company's address. So I think, yeah, there's a number of different sort of areas here that are important for us to focus on, but we always try and take it back away from technology and back into business process, customer journey, buyer journey, and really try and understand that at a deep level, and then bring those together with our experience of how technology can best support.
It's interesting because when I start a conversation with a customer, I put aside the technology for a minute. And when you refer to what they're trying to achieve, I'm using always this sentence because it resonates, doesn't matter who the customer is that what is the Northern Star? Yeah. Because technologically wise, you can kind of like meet the requirement where the customer is. I think the how can I say, the joint effort from like a solution vendor and then a system integrator is that we join forces to meet the customer requirement. But the thing is that what is the Northern Star? What are you trying to achieve? What is the end goal? Doesn't matter if we're talking at end of the year, 24 months, or even like 3 years from now. And from that standpoint, the technology is going to fit. This is kind of the idea coming back to this composable type of line of engagement. What the customer wants to achieve, and we're going to meet their requirement technologically speaking.
Yeah. And I think part of that is like looking at how we can roadmap our solution, like, and going into, yes, this is where you want to get to. And I think we spoke earlier on about a big bang approach versus doing something small and incremental, having a roadmap, having an area so we can actually start to understand what those steps are in that journey is a really key part of being able to get to the end goal. Because otherwise, if we try and sort of go straight to the end goal, there's a lot of complexity, there's change management, there's project governance, there's a whole host of things that sort of come into that that potentially could impact. So being able to have that sort of smaller engagement is always beneficial.
And from, obviously, you've mentioned there's an incredible amount of complexity there. You've touched on third-party systems, backends, and things like, for example, the ERP system, CRM, commerce. Tying everything in is quite the challenge. So why would you say it's so important to get that right, to really get to the North Star of having a seamless customer experience?
I think it's always good to have a North Star as that vision of where you want to get to. The pace that technology is changing at the moment, that North Star might shift because there might be something that comes in and you can actually deliver that functionality really quickly. It might be that no longer is a priority anymore and something else comes in. So I think it's really important to sort of keep referring back to what your roadmap is, but also keeping on top of those industry trends and keeping on top of what's going on. And I think this is why we sort of always say sort of different things to our customers around, like, just start doing something, start going on to a step in the journey, because things are going to shift. And and we can sort of stall and delay and sort of put something down to 6 months or a year later, start small and start moving towards somewhere. We might need to pivot along the way because, as we said, technology or business processes or priorities might change. But you are then going to start to, I guess, get benefit from making those changes initially.
Mm-hmm.
I will second that totally. And the thing is that it's, I would say there is also an additional layer where depending the customer that you're talking to and depending what is the biggest challenge. Funny enough, where you're thinking about kind of like deploying like a front-end experience and capturing business, you would think is that generating revenue is the key kind of like the main focus, whereas some customers is optimizing and reducing cost of serve.
Yeah.
So this is why this kind of quick way to go to market, and we saw it with COVID. From a Salesforce standpoint, we deliver some project under 4 months because the customer couldn't sell in stores anymore. They couldn't sell to their targeted. They couldn't leverage the current systems. So they needed to have like a B2B kind of like front end delivered in like 4 months, which is totally possible. Go where the customer is, meet them where they are. And then you have some other project which are more complex because we have to talk more about internal processes, the gaps, the challenges, where those need to be fixed, and then basically the experience can be deployed. So it's really depending where the priority of the customer is. Generating more revenue, capturing new business, be steady on what you're currently capturing, or just reducing the cost of serve, because both of them would support the company growth and scalability. But depending where the main kind of challenge is facing, one is going to lead to another, definitely. But the idea is that where the priority of the customer is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the trends in B2B commerce. We've talked about what technology makes possible today. But I think probably the biggest challenge remains, how do you get there? So if you think about delivery and implementation, I think the biggest challenge is maybe not so much choosing the right commerce platform. I think the biggest challenge is delivering on that project. So from your experience in the field, what would you say is the biggest challenge that businesses are facing today?
It's a really good question. There's a number of different challenges, I think, that come into the project lifecycle. But I think focusing specifically on B2B, the challenge is probably slightly more than you'd get for just a standard sales or service project. I think probably one of the first ones that we do see is around the actual change management approach. I think, as we've probably touched on a couple of times today, but a lot of customers that we work with, they have their own project teams. They've got their own internal teams that manage that. When we're looking at B2B, there isn't just a change management that we need to dictate to our internal teams. There's also a change management to our customers, how they interact with us as a business, how we want them to interact with us. They might be used to sending an email to an email address, and that's how they place their orders. Or they might be somebody gets a WhatsApp and then they type that into a system. It might be that they get printed documents down and they type that in. So there's different ways of how customers expect to interact, and having to then sort of shift to that digital world can be a challenge for some businesses. So making sure that there is an approach, an understanding and a consideration there, that's definitely one of the big things that we see, is not only managing your internal stakeholders, but also considering those external ones. I think to support that, it's then looking at things like project governance, ownership from a customer side. Whenever customers will work with delivery partners, we bring our own project governance and ways of operating to support and make sure that a project is well delivered. But then I think making sure that they've got the right structure and things internally to manage that is a consideration. And I think the other sort of point to that is around data fragmentation and process fragmentation. I think it probably touches on some of the things that we've mentioned today. They might have information in multiple systems. These projects aren't necessarily the easiest to undertake. You can start simple and grow with them, but that might mean that there's certain processes that you think are a priority, but actually you can sort of manage without for now. And sort of having, I guess, those different fragmented journeys, it's trying to tie that up in a way that adds efficiency and really supports how that business wants to operate. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, you touch on like all the different points, and I think from where I stand, because you're kind of like on the ground in the field developing the project, I'm more acting kind of like a pre-sales and like supporting the customer before when they're going to go to the implementation. And I think the two main subjects that kind of highlighted in those conversations are the data management, where the data is coming from. How can I aggregate the data? How can I utilize it? How can I consume it? We touched on Agentforce earlier about like how Agentforce is going to assist customer, how they're going to kind of be able to aggregate those insights. But you need to think about where the data, is it clean data, is duplicated, where it's coming from. We talked about connected experience. It's an easy word from Salesforce because we have this connected platform. But then when you kind of reach in the bridge to those third-party system, this is where you're going to leverage tools such as Data Cloud, for example. And again, I'm potentially biased, but this is the realm that we're extending it to. Kind of reaching the bridge. What type of data, what type of content you're going to bring to the table, and you're going to start to kind of leverage. And again, when we talk about virtual agent, it's not necessarily just for the end consumer, because you need to support those internal teams. We talked about case deflections. We talked about kind of like adapting to the customer demand. There is so much data to consume. So how are you going to aggregate that? So AI is going to leverage. Of course, you have a centralization of the informations. That being said, you need those additional kind of like data from supply chain, signals that are informed and so on. And if I can add just one point.
Go on, yeah, sorry.
The second one is the culture. It's a massive culture change. Because depending where the project you're going to assist with customers, it's going to depend what type of stage you're coming into the conversations. We touched on this kind of hybrid approach from like value framing and value affirmations. Most likely when you go to a customer and you're kind of saying like, we're going to support you delivering that, the kind of sales team starting to kind of think that their job is going to be obsolete, or we're going to kind of like erase their job. No, actually not. We're just going to free you from like filling up those orders and be more a consultant, having more kind of like a kind of like advisor type of approach. And this is where they see this hybrid type of behavior taking into place. So customer kind of like asking us a lot, how do you support customer kind of like adapting to this culture change? Of course, we talk about trainings. We talk about like supporting, depending if it's like from a vendor standpoint or even partner. I'm sure they like supporting even when the product is delivered, the training to the internal teams, but also emphasizing this experience, encouraging the end customer to utilize that. At best, an online strategy doesn't last more than 18 months?
Yeah.
And then you have to adapt to that. So the idea of kind of growing and kind of adapting to this digital first type of experience is really key.
Yeah, I think one point you mentioned there was around, I guess, data and sort of the value and importance of that. I think sort of piqued something in me then just to, so sorry for almost interrupting.
Definitely.
But I think one of the things, and I mentioned about data fragmentation, we've got data in multiple systems, multiple places, might be on spreadsheets. I think it's something that we see customers, I guess, worry about a lot. And I think sometimes it can be quite a challenge to actually wanting to start something because it's quite overwhelming. I think when you start to think about where is all my information, where is all my data on my customers, where is all my pricing information, how can I get that all in one place, how can I manage all of that? We need loads of people to be able to do that. I think coming back to what we've been to speak about, like the use cases, like you don't have to get all of your data clean and organized and in one place. It's about the information that's relevant to the particular business process or processes that you're looking to work on. That bit does need to be organized. That bit does need to be cleansed and worked on, but that doesn't have to be a huge amount of work. That could be something that's quite focused, quite targeted. You can bring, us in to be able to support with those conversations and help decide what is and isn't relevant. So I think it can be really overwhelming. And I think a lot of time people get sort of take a breath and take a step back and think, this feels like too much, but actually you can break it down and tackle it and it can be manageable. So I think it's really about sort of just focusing on those priorities. And I think that's something that it is a challenge, but it definitely can be overcome with the right approach and the right view.
I have a question for you, and it's more related to data and in relation to kind of delivering this experience. As we agree, the front end is the main experience when you kind of consolidate those different kind of aspects of the relationship with the customer. What is the top 3 kind of like connectivity that you see with this realm of B2B commerce? Like when you talked about data coming from a third-party system, what type of like data it's recurrent? Doesn't matter if you work, because I know that you're working in different industries.
Yeah.
What type of data are you kind of like seeing like it's a kind of like a must-have?
It's good question. I think it depends on the business.
Okay.
I think it depends on industry. I think you've got probably stuff that you would expect from a data perspective. So it might be products or pricing. I think one that gets overlooked actually is imaging, like CMS. Like people don't sort of think, oh, I want to get my products on a store. There is obviously a consideration there that you need to make sure that the images are good quality, they look good. So that's something that I guess sometimes gets a little bit not necessarily considered. But I guess if we sort of take a slightly different approach, I'll give an example. One of the customers I previously worked with in the HLS space, they were wanting B2B commerce, not for their sort of initial transaction. That sort of was a contracted process that was done as a back-end engagement, but it was around customers being able to repeat order. I think I mentioned them earlier, repeat order DNA strands, but then sort of a little bit of complexity about how they configure those DNA strands as well. So there was a journey that we need to take the buyers on to be able to select the right processes, the information that was relevant to them, which I guess sometimes isn't super important within B2B, wasn't just around being able to surface the right product SKU. They also wanted to have financial data sitting in B2B commerce as well. So they wanted to be able to surface invoice data, order history data, and bring, I guess, more self-service in, so we could actually support the back end of the business, not necessarily just from a sales angle. So I guess from that perspective, it was a slightly different approach to what you may expect from a B2B. It's not just about that sort of front-end sales experience. It's actually about bringing some of the other customer-related data to them so that they can actually see that and have that information.
That makes sense. If I can add one, and I was like hoping that it wasn't being a top three.
Yeah.
It's everything related to the omnichannel inventory, which is a really key thing.
Yes.
What you're going to talk about more physical type of businesses, but it's kind of like one, and maybe because I'm more kind of like more in a front end experience and the kind of like, as you said, this reordering, I need your product and services for my own business type of behavior. Is that like the omnichannel inventory? It doesn't matter if it's like multiple channels and like supply chains, third-party suppliers, or even own warehouses, is where to know if I can order, if it's upfront available, pre-reservations, and potentially kind of like pre-order even sometimes with some use cases. Yeah. Because they have bespoke product.
It's interesting. The customer I mentioned there, they actually did sort of have back-end order management as a first project. They actually went and sort of managed that omnichannel inventory piece first, because they want to be able to have orders thrown through the back end before bringing the front end as an option for customers to be able to self-service. But yeah, I think we've mentioned it earlier, but looking at a number of different fulfillment journeys or inventory locations, I think it's definitely a key part. Yeah, another example I've got is sort of one of the customers we worked with in the manufacturing space. They were an EV charging business. They had, I guess, different locations of warehouses. I think there was some in Europe, there was some over in Ireland, some in the UK. So being able to know not only have we got stock, but where best to fulfill stock from for those particular orders, depending on where the order location was from, depending on the volumes, depending on the type of product. There was some complex fulfillment logic that needed to be considered there. So I think sort of going further on in that commerce journey and actually understanding that order fulfillment was a really important part in that engagement. So yeah, it's a really good add-on there about what data you should be considering.
It's so like the essence of commerce. So I think for you it was integrated part of the
that's already in there.
I guess so. Yeah.
Next logical step.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes I guess, and I think we said this before, like the understanding that level of maturity of where that customer is and where they are in that journey. I think sometimes it can be easy to just make assumptions, and part of my job should be to challenge those, which obviously I didn't just then. But there are certain levels of where we want to go, whether that is around back-end order fulfillment, front-end commerce management, whether that is products and pricing, whether that is complex pricing, account level, contracted pricing. There's a whole host of different things that we need to consider there. Merchandising.
And if I can ask you questions, and I'm very interested about this, is that like the kind of misconception about the word B2B commerce. So sometimes when I have a conversation with a customer and we kind of start about like lay the ground about what are the challenges and what their expectation is, or when we mention this Northern Star, it's all scream front-end experience, be able to capture business, be able to better serve. But as soon as the customer hear the word B2B commerce, they're going to say, like, no, we don't want commerce, because in their head, it's an Amazon type of experience. They kind of like dissociated. So it's going to happen a lot when I'm going to have a conversation with a customer that I'm using the word ordering portal or self-service portal or like ordering capture. What about you? What is your experience?
Yeah, it's exactly, you're completely right. I think that's what we've tried to say here is around like the different, like the front end versus the back end, and making sure that that's something that's considered. It's definitely one of the challenges that we face with customers, where they definitely think more front end or they definitely think more back end. I think AI is actually going to play a big part in the change here. What happens with the storefront? I think we're all sort of aware that there's a lot of different things that are going on, whether that's LLMs allowing for purchasing directly from those. There's going to be a shift to what the storefront actually means. I don't think necessarily that means the storefront's going to completely go away, but there are going to be new channels to be able to purchase. I think one of the ones that actually really exciting me at the moment is the ability to have agents in email as a channel. Yeah. So being able to have a marketing email go out, a customer respond to that, and then be able to actually go through and make that purchase through email within that channel. That's something at the moment you can't suddenly just go and put your card details into an email, but that is something that we will be able to go through and have a purchase order generated and actually go through and have that as a sales channel. That then is going to take the back end logic that we have sitting within commerce, and it's not going to need that typical storefront. The storefront, I think, will still exist because it is going to be a space where people are going to want to browse, or if they're searching through something like a large language model, that will still take the considerations from that storefront. So we need to optimize those sites to make them visible, searchable, and navigatable through those different LLMs. So yeah, there's a lot of change going on. It's exciting, and I don't think anyone can really say where it's going to go. But I think there's a lot of innovation at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Like the innovation that I'm seeing a lot from the customer standpoint, and if we kind of talk about AI and in the Salesforce world is Agentforce, it's a lot about like when you talk about returns, MRA, reordering, how to kind of provide recommendation from a front-end perspective. So there is still this notion of like self-service experience, but it's still assisted because the buyer wants to have the power to hit the button, check out, and submit the order. So how is going to shift, and those multiple channels at the end, I'm seeing a huge trend where they're going to call it like this, the one-stop shop experience. Everything is centralized from the up. Doesn't matter which channel this has been captured on. Yeah. So this kind of storefront, as you said, is going still to be the anchor. How it's going to evolve? Yeah. Very curious to see. Yeah. But yeah, I totally agree that those different channels are growing and they kind of like coming back to the same relationship that you have from a customer standpoint. Yeah.
Thank you. And Joe, so many good points here. You've unpacked so much. Yeah. From your experience in the fields, obviously, you've delivered so many successful projects. The businesses that get it right, in a nutshell, and to recap all of the information that you've unpacked, if you had to give me, let's say, the top 3 things they've done to get it right, what would they be?
Oh, that's a good question. What are the top 3 things that they'd have done? I think the first one is start. I think actually sort of go on the journey. Don't be afraid to fail. I think a lot of the times there's concerns about not necessarily being able to get to the end goal that we're talking about. So I think starting, I think having a focus and an overview about what is your business processes. Again, I think sort of taking a step back from what we spoke about before, like really understanding who your customers are, who your buyers are, but also what your internal processes are. You put me on the spot with 3 here. So trying to think of the third one. I think it's links to that first point, but having that sort of innovation mindset, that leader mindset, I think the businesses that are being successful are ones that aren't scared to like step into something. And that project might not necessarily be the most successful, but they'll learn from that and then sort of go on to do something else that actually is super successful for them. So it's probably echoing that first point a little bit, but is there anything that you would say?
To build on what you're saying is like, let's start. And I would say, I would recommend to kind of start small instead of like waiting. What we see sometimes is customer going through years and years of benchmarking, assessing, and then they're missing out on business. When sometimes you go live, you go to the customer are the best placed to tell you what they need. When you deliver an experience, they kind of like through survey, through behaviors, from like a sample of customers, when you deliver an experience, they're going to tell you what works and what you want. And then from that, you can grow and scale.
I've actually got my point back, but I'll let you go first. Go on.
And it's just the point is building on yours as well, when you kind of like the processes. And I would say, don't be afraid to consolidate the executive and executant view. Sometimes you talk to C-level, which they have a very clear roadmap and they know where they want to go. But we're missing the point about those operational people on the ground. As I said, there is sometimes like very multiple departments involved. We talk about operations, supply chains, marketings, web, salespeople. Get those people involved into the project because they're going to see things that you potentially miss out because there is so many things that you're managing. And those are the 2 points that I would say that I would take into consideration.
She's just managed to take it
Sure,
as we're
ahead.
getting through. It links back to change management. It links back to exactly what you said, but get people involved. And I think the one I was going to sort of, when it came back to me just then was, it's not often that clients of ours will do this, but actually getting the customer involved in what the journey would look like, asking for feedback from them, getting them involved in what would be good for them to and how they want to purchase or how they want to engage with you as a distributor. So getting them involved not only in, I guess, some of the design or I guess pain points that you might hear from them, but also in the testing and the piloting. It's like going with a soft launch to a group of customers, letting them be involved in that, trusted key customers that you know. I think that's a really important part. I guess one of the things I actually would say is that we've seen a lot of success with. And on the flip side, internally getting the stakeholders across your operational life cycle involved. So I think that's definitely a key thing that that the CC's touched on there is making sure that you're getting buy-in from different people on both sides of the coin.
I can't agree more. The voice of the customer, it's really key. Like the customer is going to be the best person to tell you what they need.
Yeah.
Even I think respectively from our businesses, when you hear from customers in
100%.
influencing potentially more as a solution, as we talked about, like the solution is growing, you have a new set depending of what the market is and you tailor in it. The voice of the customer is key to kind of like influence the solution that you're going to deliver, deploy, or grow from. Doesn't matter if you talk about internalization, scalability, or agility. I think those 3 key points are better kind of like being hearing about from the customer standpoint.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so we've talked about what's happening in B2B commerce, in the B2B space now. Let's look ahead a little bit. You mentioned before that it can get really overwhelming. There's a lot of energy around emerging technology, artificial intelligence, etc. So if you had to focus and really come up with that 1 or 2 things that businesses really have to be paying attention now to be successful, what would that be? Just to remove all the bars around all the technology that is coming our way, what is that 1, 2 things that businesses have to be paying attention to?
I can start if you want to. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I think I mentioned earlier the kind of like the fast pace of the transformation, but is a constant kind of like fast pace transformation. So we have a transformation this year. The focus is going to be the same in a year time. Like 2 years ago, we were touching on AI. Today we have virtual agents, just to show you how fast things goes. So I think one of the first point is that the idea of like buy versus build, I think is the main of the focus, where you talk to customers when they used to develop and keep control or whatever they're doing. So the idea of kind of in the long term is going to be very a costly detour, because when you're going to deliver the project that you're aiming to build maybe a year ago, is not going to match anymore the demand of the market. So go from like step one and scratch and you kind of rebuild the project and so on and so on. You get the hassle in terms of maintenance, delivering the experience and so on. So I think the duality between sometimes buying and tailoring a project is way much more powerful than kind of building the solution from scratch. And the other thing is that don't be afraid to consolidate a view from a business. Sometimes when your customer think about one solution is big and rigid and is delivering what you need and everything is answered by that, not embracing the technology, and this is what we're moving from. They're kind of siloed, kind of breaking them down and bringing, when you mentioned the kind of integration earlier, working with different kind of priority depending customers.
Yeah.
This is where we kind of like the customer needs to shift from. A solution kind of like bringing all those, talk about API, third-party integration, middleware, all those different things are like taking a huge place into the business landscape. And for a reason is that because they create efficiency and help the customer to be able to be agile and grow from the business from one year to another. This is the two main points that I would say.
Yeah. Brilliant points, by the way. I think from my side, I think for customers to be successful now, I'd probably say the first one is standardize how you're currently working. Like agents are here, like people are talking about them, and I understand there's the potential fatigue talking about that, but they're not going anywhere. And I think being able to get your house in order is probably a really, now is the time to do it. Like in a year's time or 2 years' time, if you're then still trying to do that, I think you're going to be behind the curve. Yeah. And the second one I'd say is probably quite similar, but lean in on this technology. Like start seeing what's going on, start seeing what's working, like get a personal shopper onto your site, see how that interacts, see how your customers interact with that, as we just spoke about, pilot that with a customer, see how they engage with that experience. It might not work, but also you'll learn some lessons about what it will do. So I think they're the sort of two things I would say is, start with your current ways of working, I guess, without thinking about AI and try and standardize that, but then lean in on what's happening.
And let's say you're talking to a leadership team. Would your advice change, yes or no? If yes, what would the advice be? But let's say you're talking to a CIO, a CTO. What would your advice be? What do they need to do today to be successful later on?
I think it's a good question again. I think similar to what we've just been saying, I think the success now, for me, if I was thinking about sort of our business or what we do or anything that I'd advise to sort of our customers as well is like making sure that you're not having data silos, you're not having process silos, the challenges that we've just discussed that are happening, put in program governance, have a structure for how you want continuous improvement to be in the business. I would get the structure in place now because as we've seen, technology is changing. It is about adapting, like adding on the new things, changing, pivoting. I think making sure that you've got the foundations in place internally for that. I appreciate that might be a shift in how things have currently been done, or that might be a different approach to sort of the internal business structure. But I think it's something that's really important. I don't know if you.
And I'm going to be like, I'm going to put my solution engineer hat here, but I would switch the gear depending who I'm talking to, because I want to know what are, first of all, their KPIs, what they're focusing on, but also what are the challenges. Yeah. Because when you're going to talk about a CIO, he's going to look about processes, automations. When you're going to talk to a CMO, they're going to kind of like looking about conversions, penetrations. Yeah. When you're going to talk to a sales rep, he's going to look at efficiency, but without raising this kind of like the sales power that they have in the room. So what I would focus on is like always kind of, I can provide so much answers. We have been talking for a while now, and there is so much like use cases that pops into mind, but it comes down to what the customer wants to achieve. What is the Northern Star that they would like to lean on? And then we are building a use case on that. Because as I said, I've been working for together, we know each other for quite some time.
We've known each other a long time.
So many use cases, so many industries. And you can work for like literally two different competitors in the same industry where the way to go to market is totally different.
Agreed.
Because they're struggling at a different stage. So this is what I would, I'm not answering your question per se, but would be my approach.
Makes sense. Sissy, Joe, I've got one final question for you to end on a fun note. Think about the one piece of innovation that you're personally excited about. But what I want you to do is to think the sky's the limit type thing. Think futuristic, sci-fi type thing. The sky's the limit. What's that innovation that you're personally excited about? I was trying to find something that I would say if somebody asked me the question, and I realized that anything I could come up with is kind of already there in some shape or form. So I'm interested to see what you would say.
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. I think it's a bit on the spot, but I think what I would say, there's probably a couple of things that spring to mind for me. I think one of the sort of points I raised, you asked for one, I'm probably going to give two here. I think one that I think would be really cool would be there's some level of this at the moment. I'm going to say dynamic personalization on sites. But what I mean by that is that every customer that interacts with you has a completely unique experience based on the information that we have around them. So thinking if I log on as a distributor or a B2C customer or whoever it might be, all onto the same site, but my experience is completely different, and the promotions that have appeared to me or the products that are surfaced to me or the way the page is designed is unique to me in my experience, and using AI to tailor that experience, I think that would be quite a cool. And I guess there's elements of personalization now. I think the way that I'm thinking about it is that, it's completely unique per every interaction rather than tailored on customer groupings.
A good answer.
Yeah.
Really good answer. With my pragmatic mind, I'm trying to think of how, not necessarily kind of a sci-fi, but evolution. We talked a lot about AI and how Salesforce is already kind of laid in the ground around like Agentforce, merchant, buyer, even you mentioned shopper with your experience and leading with customers. What I would love to see in a B2B is that the B2B predictive storefront type of experience based on real-time signal, supply chains. Like imagine if you have a customer going to the front-end experience and the order is already kind of predicted based on all this last-minute behavior. Think about like a hurricane, think about struggle in a supply chain from NHLS productions, or think about those different things where I'm logging in, my order, my cart is already pre-filled or pre-suggested, but based on this real-time data, I think we kind of like, it's far-fetched from what we have today because we kind of relying on the customer behavior. We aggregating all those different line of engagement.
Yeah.
But then with how the speed of AI is growing and what we're providing, I think we can picture this like happening maybe next year or 2 years' time, hopefully.
Take it one step further, so that like digital twin aspect of where, as you said, that rather than being in my cart, that purchase already happens. That's automatically, other than to certain levels of approval, that automatically happens behind the scenes, and there's no interaction whatsoever between humans.
So we can kind of like multiple use cases here. Keep on running on this.
Sorry,
like
Cece, we're taking over your...
No. It's really good because this is kind of like where I think this is how customer envisioning today the AI world. We are just at the premise of it. We know that B2C is leaning in because we're using it in a personal life, but B2B is just at our starting point.
Yeah.
So how this is going to emerge and what trend is going to grow from it, I think the dream is endless.
Yeah. Agreed.
Sky's the limit.
Exactly.
I've got a final question, Cece. Of the projects that your customers you've been a part of over your years in Salesforce, what's the one that's excited you the most being involved in? Sorry to put you on the spot.
There's a lot. Without naming the customer, if I can kind of talk about a project, is where we were faced with a customer coming with like, and I think this is the running theme of today, this very siloed view when they wanted to expose the front-end experience and they wanted to reach out to B2B and to D2C customers. Yeah. And they really were focusing on how delivering this front-end experience without realizing that they already had like such a huge kind of like footprint from Salesforce and they would like utilize this. So it was really thrilling to kind of educate the customer and kind of like telling you already have the account, you already have the contact, you already have everything that is your baseline that takes months and months to establish. As you said, you work
Yeah.
on project, you know
Exactly.
how much time it takes to kind of deliver this type of things. How you kind of like make the customer understand that this can be like very tremendous and significant change in terms of like opportunities and value. And when the customer kind of like literally understand that and you're coming to an agreement and delivering this experience, it's really great. So it was in business services where we were talking about digital product, and they were already kind of utilizing Salesforce, but just from an internal view.
Yeah.
They had a hard time visualizing how they can, I call it crossing the bridge, because you're reaching out to the customer, you let them kind of like providing you the insight that they want to, and to see the achievement of that was great.
Nice. Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
No problem. But yeah, it was a great project.
Yeah.
Well, Cece, Joe, what a great conversation. We've unpacked so much today.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes.
so much. I think it's really clear that your passion is contagious when it comes to technology, this space. So thank you so much. And to everyone listening or watching, thank you so
Hopefully
much.
you stayed
Yes.
until the end.
Hopefully you're still here. And a big thank you from us. And we really hope that you are walking away with some fresh ideas that you can take back to your teams. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank
both.
you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.